Welcome to Mother, the show where we can explore our inner mothers to actualize our greatest selves. Through interviews with incredible guests, live coaching sessions, and my own experiences, we're going to dive deep into embracing feminine values and reparenting ourselves. So be prepared to show up, hold space, and be mothered in a way you never have before, but have always needed. It's time to rewrite the mother code. Welcome to Mother, Rewriting the Mother Code with me, Dr. Gertrude Lyons. This is episode. I'm all a Twitter. I'm just shaking with excitement because I have the privilege and opportunity to sit here and share with you, my audience, Marianne. You know, if we were live, there'd be a lot of clapping going on. You have announced your candidacy for presidency. That is a really big deal. I'm extra thrilled and honored to be sitting here with you, given the courage that takes, the womanness that takes. And we're going to have a conversation about that, but tied in with mothering. So I think they're very connected personally, because mothering a child, mothering the world, mothering a country, it all goes together, right? So if you don't mind, well, first of all, welcome, Marianne, and then I'm going to say a little more official things about you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. They're not just connected. They are intimately connected and very much a part of why I am running. When I was a young person, my mother used to say that a woman's greatest, most important role was to take care of her children and to take care of her home. Now, I guess I was a teenager when I first heard my mother say that. And at the time, I thought it was kind of retro and uncool, and I wanted to do something much more important than just take care of children and the home. It took me decades to realize how right my mother was and how wrong I was in some of my projected judgments onto her. I do realize, however, that we have evolved to the realization that it can't just be our children, it has to be every woman's child. And that we have to see the earth itself as our shared home. So, you know, a lot of times women talk about the rising feminine and all of that. The feminine is, as much as anything, care of the children, care of the home, care of the hearth. Now, policies in our country are almost proactively neglectful of our children compared to other Western democracies. The fact that we do not have free healthcare, the fact that we do not have paid family leave, the fact that we do not have more stringent rules regarding toxins in our food, toxins in our water, toxins in our air. The fact that we do not have built into our public policies a recognition of how important those first 10 years of life are. For instance, if a child has not learned to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. We know how much of the population of violent criminals in our prisons have multiple adverse childhood experiences. So when I ran before and also continuing now, I wish to see a cabinet-level Department of Children and Youth. It's almost absurd, actually, that we have a Department of Agriculture, but we don't have a Department of Children. We have Department of Children and Human Services, and Family Services, but it's within another department because earlier in our history, either children weren't treated in such a dangerous way or we didn't know about it, one or the other. But the way things are now, we have at-risk factors for our nation's children that are overwhelming, and they're overwhelming the system. You know, you might have seen that the Seattle Public Schools is suing big tech because there has not been proven, not just a correlation, but a causation between what social media is doing to these kids' brains and childhood depression, inability to sleep, inability to study, inability to perform well at school, et cetera. So I see America's children in crisis to a great extent. And many of those things that I just mentioned, I don't care how much money someone has. You can't protect your child from poisons in the air, for instance. You can't protect your child from some of the factors that are becoming more and more threatening. So this is very much a child-centric campaign, and it's very much a part of my own motivation and inspiration for running.
That's beautiful, Marianne. And it obviously touches and hits my heart very strongly in that regard, and taking responsibility, not just for my children, but all children, and the mother that's, we're dismissed the mother in the picture. We just have, COVID showed us how burnt out they are. Mothering is positioned in our culture as either a loss, sacrifice, exhaustion, or some ultimate expression, of being a woman. There's not much in between of what it's supposed to be, but neither of those are true. I'm working on supporting them to dig in, look at what are those codes? What is it that's wired in us personally, that is listening to those voices, that's allowing that, to continue. It's like we're a fish in water. We don't even know how destructive so many of the paradigms that are going on, everything from conception to birth to early motherhood to raising a child. And, for me personally, I also want them to know there's a transformational opportunity in it all, right? Like this isn't just a thing you're going to self-sacrifice to. You're going to grow and transform. In fact, you have to, if you're really doing the job with them. And I, again, see that with our country, right? It's an inside job. We have to take responsibility, look and see what the problems are. So, we can help, we can heal. And that's I'm resonating with what you're saying.
Also think it very much affects how men see women who are pregnant, how men see mothers. When I was many years ago, I went to Egypt, and going there, I studied about Egyptian mythology. And in Egyptian mythology, Isis has a son named Horus, and Horus will become the first pharaoh, and he is the divine child. This is thousands of years before the birth of Jesus, but the archetypes were already there. So her wicked brother was after the child to destroy him, just like Herod was out to destroy all the Jewish babies. The themes are all the same, actually. So she knew that her brother knew what she looked like. So she said, somebody else is going to have to raise this child, because otherwise, if he stays with me, I know my brother will find him. She said, but who could I have suckle the baby? Because it can't just be a regular woman. It has to be a goddess like me. So she found the goddess Hathor, and she's pictured with cow's ears because she suckled a divine child. The point that's so interesting to me is that in Egyptian mythology, Hathor, and you see pictures of her holding the baby at her breast, much like the pictures of Mary holding Jesus. And what happens in Egyptian mythology is that when Horus becomes old enough that he is no longer at his mother's breast or on his mother's lap or at his mother's side, instead of his leaving the mother to find the woman who will be the object of his sexual affection, she transforms. Now, that's very interesting, because in Christianity, it became so much about the mother and the whore. It became so much about you can either be this glamorous, the woman of, sexual, sensual excitement, or you fall into this mother role. When I was younger, this is why both Jacqueline Kennedy and Princess Diana were so important. They were major images of women who clearly put their motherhood above all else, and yet retained this sort of glamour as women. And I think there's been a real psychic split for a lot of women, because like you said, when you have a child, you're going to transform. Your life is going to be different. To me, that's the point. Okay, this is a change. There's this other human being in the house who's my child. This changes my relationship to myself, changes my relationship to them, changes my relationship to the father figure, or if it's a woman, a lesbian relationship, or to the mother, whatever. So that's why conversations like this are so important, so that it can be something that integrates all the aspects of who we are, rather than producing chaos and emotional pain, which we've all known as well.
Well, now I'm thinking thank you for sharing that. And that's such that also wired in us, but we forget, right? We forget these aspects of a system that worked, basically, right? Like things that worked in our history that, we can bring forth and have at our disposal now. And some of it's just, connecting with those divine sources, right? To connect with that aspect of Hathor or Isis, or whatever, you might have an inclination toward, the Virgin Mary, right? Any of them, so that there are models, right? There are models for us but we
Well,
have to
sometimes
see through, right? We have to see through some of what has been said about them that isn't true.
Well, sometimes we had some negative modeling. I know in my case, I had positive modeling, but didn't even realize it till I was older. I didn't realize what a positive model my mother was. I didn't realize what a positive model my grandmother and aunts were until much later. But I also think that in terms of what's going on in our country, people are realizing that it's not just about our personal psychological or emotional state. It's about the health of our children. So many American kids with asthma now. So many American children with higher level, chronic levels of disease, childhood diseases that the other countries don't have. And that does get into public policy. That does get into our agencies. Who's appointed to head them? Is the agency, a lot of times there's a double allegiance. They're trying to, yes, stand up for the safety and health and well-being of America's citizens, but also bowing to the short-term profit maximization of big food, big agriculture, big chemical companies, et cetera.
Sure.
Big chemical companies are particularly disturbing some of the pesticides. There's one particular pesticide that has a chemical in it which was known to harm a child's brain. During the Trump administration, the lobbying of the chemical company was so great that they allowed that to continue its manufacture. It has been stopped under the Biden administration, but look at all those years when little kids were,
that's in their
running
DNA.
around the backyard, and those pesticides were on the grass or on the trees. I see the state of America's children. Really, there's an emergency factor here. And no matter who you are, no matter what neighborhood you live in, many times people say that the earth and the planet and climate change, all those issues are the worst collateral damage of corporations run out of control. Corporations run amok, as in something like big oil. But I think the biggest collateral damage is to America's children, because children are not old enough to vote, so they don't have it. They're not a constituency.
Right.
And they're not old enough to work, so they don't have any financial leverage. And our system is so corrupt that money speaks loudest. So even though children are citizens, what we should see is their alienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are often shunted aside. And if we as women and as mothers do not speak for our children, who is going to?
When we were together, had the opportunity to be with you in December, so much of that was what is still ringing with me, right? I don't think women have ever been more called than they are now, right? And I felt called, and everything from, living feminine values, being a mother who's thoughtful, critically thinks, and is trying to wade through, the wiring of our culture, and even with what you said, like taking the time to look at like what treasures did I have in my upbringing and what didn't work, so that I can wire it differently. I can do it differently. I have, we're not powerless. And that was another thing I felt so encouraged by. It's not hopeless, right? I'm not powerless, but I do have to take responsibility. And, it was why I was so excited, with your message and, sobered. And, I have a privileged position. I can easily act like, oh, this doesn't affect me somehow. I can feel like I can rise above it because I have means. And like what you said, this is affecting all of us, everyone on the planet, whether, at whatever socioeconomic level you are. And, that's what we have to get through. It has to get through.
And as I was saying before, there's no amount of money that can protect you from what will happen if, God forbid, the proverbial, shit hits the fan. We're really talking about threats to the survivability of the species within the next 50 to 100 years. That's our grandchildren. It's not even just about our children. It's about our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. You already have young people in this country, and a lot of them, who are saying that given the state of the environment, given the state of their own economic circumstances, whereas otherwise they would be considering having children, they're actually foregoing that. Well, that's a big deal. I was talking to a young couple the other day. They're both high achievers. They both have very good jobs. They're everything America should be proud of, right? They knew it was going to be tough for them economically to have children. They did have children. And the cost of childcare is so high that he is turning down, and this is part of the whole thing about not having universal health care. There are people like them all over this country who are in jobs that are not the jobs that make their heart sing, because they need it for the guarantee of the money for childcare. They need it for medical, for the healthcare. So as mothers, as women, we have to think about how many of these people are, it doesn't have to be us. It doesn't have to be our child. The mother is not just thinking about herself. And we have to evolve to this idea of other people's children, that the love that will save the world is not just the love for our children. It's also the love for other people's children, not only on the other side of town, but for that matter, on the other side of the world. You have, for instance, our continuing to sell arms to Saudi Arabia, who is prosecuting a genocidal war in Yemen. Something like 10,000 children are thought to have been killed by this war. Well, that's your tax money. That's my tax money. And that's the moral authority of the United States. The women of the United States should not and cannot look away from this. I think it's our moral responsibility to care about others and to care about the children of mothers in the world who have no way of defending their own children, especially when what they need to defend their children against is policy, at least indirectly related to the policies of our country.
Marianne, this is also connected for me, and something else that inspired me when you were talking, but also reading one of your 14 wonderful books, all of which are, have a message that I think is so important and adds to this dialogue and this conversation. But I wasn't aware that, one of your intentions, what call it, platform is founding a Department of Peace. And, so I kind of put those together, right? Because in the mother realm, like the feminine, the yin.
Wait till you hear.
Wait
till you hear this. So there are principles of peace building. So it's kind of like the way we look at integrative medicine. You don't just wait till you get sick. You proactively cultivate health, because sickness is the absence of health. Health is not the absence of sickness. Same with conflict and peace. Conflict is the absence of peace. Peace is not the absence of conflict. So we must proactively cultivate peace. So there are 4 factors which are core to peace building. And when these are present, statistically, you have a higher incidence of peace and a lower incidence of conflict. Number 1, expanded economic opportunities for women. Number 2, expanded educational opportunities for children. Number 3, the reduction of violence against women. And number 4, the amelioration and diminishment of unnecessary human despair.
Wow.
Take care of people, and so what could be more feminine and what could be more mothering? I was reading an article yesterday, we've had all these horrible mass murders, right?
Yes.
So I was reading an article about they're doing all these studies of the psychological profile of these mass killers. Well, as any woman could have told you, isolation and despair. Sometimes I've read about, not always, but many times you read about some of these people who have committed heinous acts and you think, who might have gotten to them when they were a child and made a difference?
Yeah, what was absent and what could have made a difference?
Anytime you leave a child, and by the way, 6-year-old child shot his teacher in Virginia the other day. And of course, the danger. I mean, we don't even know what we're doing here. We have a whole generation of elementary school children who are now going to school every morning, saying a little prayer in their heart that I won't be shot today. Praying that they will not be shot today. Elementary school teachers praying they won't be shot today. This is how insane it is. And these children are not even seeing somebody stand up and try to really do anything. That the NRA, the gun manufacturers, are so powerful. Their undue economic influence is so powerful that this is the total example. Our government serves gun manufacturers and the profits of gun manufacturers more than it serves our children. And this is why an assault weapons ban is so important. There's no reason for a person just walking down the street in America. They don't need a weapon of war. Those are weapons of mass destruction, and they're meant to be in the hands of soldiers at war.
So upset. And
well,
and
the
so
good
called,
news is, like you were saying, these are opportunities for transformation. If the American women rise up, the American woman rises up and goes to town hall meetings and says, I will not vote for you unless you want an assault weapon ban. I will not vote for you unless you're going to vote for greater oversight and more teeth in the FDA. Do you know that in the Food and Drug Administration, when I was a child, Food and Drug Administration agent could walk into a grocery store and say, this is a known carcinogen. Get this off the shelves. Then it moved in the 1980s to all that the FDA agent can do is write a polite letter to the CEO of the food company, say, would you please consider taking it off the shelves? Now the FDA agent isn't even allowed to mention it. I don't even know what these people are there for half the time. That's how much these agencies have been diminished in terms of advocacy for the safety, health, and well-being of people.
And I go right to, like, as you were saying that another thing that has really stood out for me in the platform that you have is leading with love, right? Love. And we're not loving. That's not a loving act, right? To allow poison into our children's bodies, into the body. It's not like, oh, we're all going to like sit around and love each other. No, we're going to act from love and caring about our fellow humans. And
we really need to get over this. We really need to stop allowing ourselves to do the ditzy woman thing and call that loving. It's called infantile. It's called immaturity. There are too many women in this country still doing the little girl thing. Yeah. Sometimes love says no. In every advanced mammalian species that survives and thrives, a common characteristic is the fierce behavior of the adult female of the species when she senses a threat to her cubs. If you go hiking, right, and there are black bears anywhere, this is what they'll tell you. They'll leave you alone, and just don't go near their babies. They're coming after you. Yeah. The mother bear, the mother lion, the mother tiger. Now, if they see you come near their babies, they're gonna go insane, right? We don't call that an angry tiger or an angry lion. We say that's what nature did. That's what nature does. That's how the species becomes propagates. Is that we are hormonally programmed to protect our young. We all have that. Everyone listening right now has that in terms of the child in front of me, whether it's my child or someone else's. But we can go into this kind of grandiosity and denial as a society. At this point, these are collective. You can't, if your water is filled with poison, or if your air is filled with poison, or just, you can protect yourself. People talk about this all the time. I don't show my children those television shows. I don't show my children, feed my children that, but they go to their friends' houses. And then, of course, now the threats have become so huge, the fentanyl crisis, et cetera. Yeah. Women in America must become politicized now. And all I mean by that is, please vote. Yes. Please stand up. Please stop looking away. Because to be a responsible mother today means being a responsible mother beyond just my house. Mm-hmm. And if and when we do, this country will change in unimaginable ways.
Hi, I'm so excited to share with you my 2024 Spring Equinox Self-Mothering Retreat that's happening this March 2024. And I would love for you not only to consider it, but to attend. But in considering it, hey, just knowing that you would be leaving cold weather, if that's the space that you're in, and coming down to just magnificently beautiful, warm, nourishing place of Zihuatanejo, Mexico. Zihuatanejo meaning land of the goddess women, and coming to really take time for yourself. Okay. And that I am learning more and more isn't just a nice thing to do or something extravagant or something selfish. It's essential. And I really want you to take it seriously, to consider, just think about what would it take for me to go. It's a 5.5-day retreat. Getting from where you are, getting there, landing there, and then being in a space that is all about you. It's all about nourishing you. It's all about tuning into you, using everything around us, the nature, the food, the beautiful people, the rituals, ceremonies. I bring it, we really bring it. And we go deeper and deeper as the days go on, and we release, we let go, we bring in what is nourishing, what is empowering, what is that space of just really divine feminine energy. And we do it in the community of women. It's not for everyone. I will be honest, if that idea of leaving and not making it work, or it's just too hard, not for you. If the idea of, spending that amount of time inwardly focused and going to that level of self-awareness doesn't sound like something you're willing to do or put the time and energy into, then it's not for you. And it's good to know that, right? So this is for people who are serious about what it means to mother themselves, what it means to take time for ourselves, and that gift and what that gift can bring to us. It was originally right after my fall retreat. It filled right up. But now some people, it turns out, are not able to come. So I do have a handful of openings. And if you're listening to this and you're willing to take that step, please reach out to me. We can do a discovery call, or you can put a deposit down. I would love that. And you can do that by going to my website, www.drgertrudelyons, DrGertrudelyons.com. Go to events, and there you go. It'll all be there. There's a beautiful page there for you to explore. I look forward to hearing from you and then seeing you on my spring retreat. And I don't think it has to take a long time with what you're saying. It's really just kind of, it's a wake up, right? And as you were saying that about, and this intensive mothering paradigm that we're in, it's becomes child-centric, but not like child-centric from this. It's, how do I hover over my child? How do I, yes, we want to give them the best things that we can and education and all of that, but we're not thinking about like, am I raising a child that's going to be an independent thinker, that is going to be able to live on its own? I mean, there's so many children now that are, I was talking to my daughter who's 24, and she said when she was in high school, probably 8 out of 10 of her friends were on antidepressant, right? Like that's not, there was some mothering that didn't happen. And yes, people have issues, and I'm not, diminishing like, attention deficit disorder and some things that people like, can be helped. But this is like, and she felt like I wouldn't give them to her because she was struggling or having strong emotions. And I was the bad guy. Like I was the bad mother because I wasn't going to allow that. And, it's those things just like really rile me up. Right. And that's the pharma, the big pharma, the drug companies that have, hypnotized us, basically put a spell on us that like, no, this is what your child needs. And we care. Right. So we listen, we think that, that man, the great Oz, is and I don't mean like just men, but the great Oz that's giving us some magical thing and not realizing, not understanding the ramifications of it all. So
the medical pharmaceutical overprescription of America should not be considered a fringe topic.
No.
We are the most medicated society, and in some ways among the advanced societies, the least healthy. So the fact that we're all asking what's going on here regarding overprescription of medications across the board, none of us should apologize for that.
No, and I feel really strongly in the arena of having, raising the awareness. It's not a right or wrong, like, now you're a bad mother because, you chose medication at any phase, of your mothering, for yourself, for them. It's that we're not taking the responsibility to become aware, and the voices that have been silenced, up till now, that, we have this medicalized birthing system that's all just a big business. And we have some of the worst infant mortality of any developed country. Like, shouldn't somebody start questioning or think like, oh, if that's the case, why do I feel like that's the safe the only safe way, for us. And, you start on that path, and that's just going to get wired in as your choice. So there's, there's options, right? And there's options that can work for a lot of women that are everything in between. I'm not saying everybody should have a unmedicated home birth, or, sign up for their cesarean on the other end. It's just that there's a lot in between and a lot of possibilities.
Yeah. We have been trained, you can't get a greater system of genius than nature. And yet we have been trained
to
distrust
right?
nature. Yeah. The Western scientific mind has come up with this idea in its arrogance that somehow we've improved on nature. But I do think that there's a real movement in this country away from that as well. The spell, you mentioned it as a spell that was cast or a trance. You're right. It is. It's a code that's putting you so young. But I do think there's a lot of awakening, a lot of people more interested in natural remedies, more interested in preventative health, positive diet, holistic medicine, integrative medicine. So I do think that, we are living simultaneously at a time when something essential seems to be falling apart, and at the same time, something is struggling to be born. And I think of us as we have a responsibility to be both death doulas and birth doulas. We're meant to be sort of societal hospice workers to help that which needs to die in a just and gentle, tender way, and that which is struggling to be born. We also know as mothers that birth is messy and that it can be painful. But we must give birth to another world. And that's also something for me about women and age. The species will not be able to perpetuate itself if enough young women, or what do they call it now, impregnatable persons, do not give birth. But this species will also not survive if we do not produce more wisdom. And often it's those of us who are mothers, or, you don't have to have been to be a mother to have the expanded mother consciousness, which is just a part of mature living.
Yes.
Sometimes it is the fact that we are not young anymore that actually has given us the accumulation of experience and layers of circumstances that really makes our own consciousness, our own heart, our own brain, the womb out of which this new world will emerge. So the mother consciousness in all of us, men, women, gay, straight, and no matter what age, are needed in order to allow that aspect of mother, divine mother, really, to give birth through and among all of us, because a new world does need to be given birth to. And if we don't give it birth, there isn't anyone else who's going to do it.
No, nope. We know the ultimate conclusion to that story, right? And I think we want to think that it could be some other way, but it can't without what what you're talking about and what we're underlining here. And two things as are in my mind about some of what you're saying. We started at the beginning with this mother archetype of Isis, and I brought in Mary, and I always think of them as this compassionate, the aspect. But then there's the mother bear, right? The protective, and I think that has been missing. And I've only recently started exploring, the mother archetype of Kali, the Hindu goddess.
She gets
Kali.
pissed.
And I just love her, and but in our culture, it'd be like, oh, she's like
angry,
the angry one, right? And she only gets angry when it's needed, right? And
listen, God forbid somebody came in and started messing with your children, you would get very, very fierce. We have enough stories of mothers and fathers too. We shouldn't leave that out, but enough stories of mothers who absolutely not only would do whatever they could to protect their children, but also in relation to their children. Who among us, if you've ever had a teenager, right? It happens to almost all of us. Somewhere in those teenage years usually involves sex, drugs, alcohol, something along that line. And this fierce something comes up from the bottom of things. That will not happen in this house. Do you understand me? Well, it's pretty funny, actually, because at the moment you're saying those things, you're actually chuckling inside because you don't even know what you would do if they challenge you at that moment, but you're so fierce they're not going to. To me, that is the attitude we need to develop about this country.
Yes.
when it comes, whether it's fentanyl, whether it's poison in our food, whatever it is, that will not happen in this country. We didn't get the right to vote just to sit around. We got the right to vote so that we could try to change things. But too often we do not use the power in the society that we have.
Yeah. And I think that's, what you're calling us to. And for me, what is so encouraging, remarkable, courageous on your part is to stand up and make this claim in running for president. And, talk about going right into the heat of the battlefield, right? Where it all is like a mess and it's this and ugly and so many
it's like that song,
masculine constructs, right? That, but you're doing it. And I think, like to see that as a clarion call for it doesn't mean everyone's going to jump up and run for president, but you could take that, do that, say that courageous thing or speak, listen from that like gut clench and say something, right? And do something.
It's like the song, put a woman in charge, put a woman in charge. I said when I ran before, I always said we need a mother in the White House and you can take that however you want it. We need somebody in the Oval Office who says that policy will not work. It will hurt children. Mm-hmm. We need someone in the office who is going to say, tell me why we're going to give corporate subsidies to the tune of billions of dollars when we have children or tax cuts to the very, very wealthiest, when we have children in this country who are going to schools that don't even have working toilets, that are flooded. When I was running before, there were elementary school teachers who told me that they had children in their schools on suicide watch. Public schools all over, and for all I know, private schools as well, I don't know, all over this country that regularly have trauma rooms, or what you were mentioning before about the depression issues among our children. We have to start seeing these things as the blinking red lights that they clearly are. Now, if you take an integrative approach to healing society, which I think we must, it's body, mind, and spirit. So there's no magic wand. There's no set of public policies that are going to make it all correct. It's got to be both. It's got to be how we think of our own children, cracking that code, as you were saying. Where do we have, the Course in Miracles says, beware the danger of an unrecognized belief. I think you already brought up something here that made me think, what makes a woman think that somebody who has met her child for an hour knows what that child needs more than she does?
Yeah.
Right? I don't care what words they have behind their name. We have been so disconnected from the sense of our own hormonal and intuitive connection to what our children need that literally millions of years of evolution have built into us. So some of the changes have got to be personal, some of them are cultural, and some of them on the level of public policy. It's not either or, it's both and. But I think women have to get into the issue of public policy in order to make some of these changes, without which, no matter what you do on a personal level, there will continue to be these threatening factors in your child's life.
Yeah, here. And I think in all of those arenas, what's striking me is, we're all connected, right? We're all part of the system. There isn't in my family the problem child, and we'll fix that child, and I don't have to look at myself, right? Or it's what happened. I don't know, what happened over there. We'll send them off and get that child fixed, but without seeing, and it's not like to look at how am I to blame for it? It's like, no, I have something to learn about this. Like that child is playing something out for all of us in this family. And that's kind of a cool thing to look at. It isn't just this horrible, I got to punish myself. No, it's cool. But same with policy. I'm part of that, to act like, I'm not part of that. No, I'm connected in that system. And that's that more, when we wake ourselves up to that more motherly, right brain, hemisphere, like denying that we're not all impacted, connected, and can play a part is, I think, hurting us.
Well, I remember when the change started to happen, probably around in the 1970s. It used to be, as you said, your child was a problem. You'd go to the therapist, you'd go to the rehab center, you'd go to the whatever and say, my child is a problem, fix my child. And then the consciousness began to change, that it's a family issue. The child is living within a family system. So if you're really going to address what's a problem for the child, you have to address everyone in the family. Now we have to realize the same applies to society.
Yeah.
You can't just talk about we're depressed individuals without talking about what are the factors in the society that are contributing to that depression, particularly how much of that has to do with the disconnection that so many of us are experiencing. Everything has become a commodity. Every person is a consumer. There's so many aspects of the way we are living as these atomized beings we don't know our neighbors, we don't know our coworkers, everybody is so just trying to survive. Mm-hmm. And that means something is very wrong in your society if so many people are living on some level of survival. When you have 63% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, I mean, the level of economic tension and anxiety on a chronic level that accompanies those kinds of circumstances, that person does not have the bandwidth that they should have to be present to their children. In the 1970s, the average American worker could afford a home, could afford a car, could afford a yearly vacation, could afford to send their kids to college, and could afford for one parent to stay home if they wanted to. That was only 50 years ago, and it's not an accident that it changed. Mm-hmm. Public policy is responsible for the fact that so much economic resource was squeezed out of the middle class of the United States. Now, the person living the life that I just described, this kind of Ozzie and Harriet, Donna Reed, Dick Van Dyke Show, had time to be there for their children, had the energy to be there for their children. The family had time to relax, to be there with each other, to talk. Now, a lot of that is personal. A lot of it is you stop letting your kids bring the tablet to dinner. Right. A lot of that. I'm not saying we don't have to take some personal responsibility for all that as well. It's both and. Yeah. But this is why economic justice matters, because it's far more difficult to be the people that we want to be of deep connection when we're living constantly on such a state of, like I said, survival. Mm-hmm. That we're just trying to
free, we're living from our lower brain, limbic, right? We're not going to make good decisions from there.
So how good a mom, and there are so many people trying, so many people, and then and healthcare, if they were living in any other advanced democracy, the healthcare would be free. We should have free, and our young people, if we're going to be mothers, I mean, in other countries, in other European advanced democracies, people go to college. It's true in Australia. I assume it's true in New Zealand. They go to college as high as their academic achievement level will take them, or technical school. And then when they start to make a certain amount of money, the state will start, the government will start taking some of that money every month out of your paycheck when you are making enough,
a certain amount
that can be done without shackling you the way so many of our young people are shackled by these college loans. I think the women in America need to be at the forefront of imagining the world that we want. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we will continue to be just trying to survive this world that we don't want. The change will only come if we stand up for a different possibility, and that's how we are with our children. When we think of certain bad things, we just say, that will not happen. That will not happen. That will stop now. And that's how we have to become about our country.
Thank you, Marianne. I am, even deepening, my resolve in this. It's, my hope that going at it at the angle I am is making a difference. But I know there's so much more for me, so much more I can, places I can stand up. Sometimes it's just with my husband, who's, a lovely man, but also can have a very, kind of masculine, blinders on, kind of sight. But it's up to me to expand that vision for him at times, and then it's like, he's so grateful for the times I have. And then there's plenty of times where he wants to shut it down. And I just, I do that little girl thing, we've been in a dance around that our whole life. But the other day to have my daughter say Mom, I know you weren't the one that made all the money in the family or that, but we wouldn't, I wouldn't have the social emotional intelligence. We wouldn't, have what we have if it wasn't for you. And there's nothing, I don't think, a child could say to me, that would, and that doesn't dismiss the expectations my husband had on them, getting through college, getting good jobs, and all of that. But to have her honor that aspect of it was, about the best gift I think I got last year.
Well, I think that's the
from that.
highest level of achievement that a woman can have as a mother, is that we can look and see our kids are happy, our kids are well adjusted, our kids are achieving. They say a woman is only as happy as her least happy child. We suffer, of course, when our children are not happy. But I hope that any woman who is listening right now, whose child is going through something, will also have patience and know that God's not finished with your child yet. And many of the things that do happen, I don't want any mother to feel that if your child is not happy or not well adjusted, that it's your fault. I think that when we, I often tell people at my lectures, I'll say, what's your religious background? They'll say Catholic, and I'll say, go to a Catholic church and light a candle to Mary and ask Mary to overshadow your motherhood. I think there is a sense, if we're talking about divine, the divine feminine and all of these images of the spiritual, sometimes we can ask them very directly to take care of our children and to help us through things. Did you ever see the movie In the Name of the Father?
No.
It was this really extraordinary film quite a few years ago with Daniel Day-Lewis, and it was based on a true story of these people in Ireland who were falsely accused and falsely convicted and then imprisoned of violence, IRA violence in London or in England somewhere. And the people who were put in prison were innocent. They were not the ones who had committed the acts. And I think it was one of the young women who was put in prison, her mother would just not give up. And her mother it's extraordinary the way they show it in the film. And she kept praying to the Virgin Mary, Catholics in Ireland. Very, very beautiful film, and a very beautiful presentation of the perseverance of the mother who would not give up, and the incredible things that happened because of it. And they were all ultimately released from prison. And
beautiful.
It was officially recognized that there had been a false accusation, etc.
I think that's going to be a place for us to start to wrap up, although I don't want to. I want to keep going and going because I think we need to hear all of this. We need to be reinforced, with this message, the not giving up and the fortitude and, the asking for help, like, from my neighbor, from my girlfriend, from whoever, and, from a divine archetype that moves you. And, I've been finding some pretty significant support in that realm in a way that I haven't. And it makes a difference. I mean, it really makes a difference. It isn't, I'll share this one story because I think, I was having trouble sleeping. I don't know, getting older, menopause, like waking up, and I was stressed about some things. And so I have recently, from kind of a ancient perspective and up to having been raised Catholic, not a practicing Catholic, but the rosary's always meant something to me because my grandparents said it. My grandfather prayed a rosary for me like every day, right? Like, how beautiful is that to have somebody praying for you? And I know that matters. And I'm not sleeping and I'm stressed and I'm upset, kind of tense. And I'm saying these like prayers to like go to sleep, right? I'm like, if I say this rosary, it'll put me to sleep. And I heard, this voice or whatever, like the message I got in that moment was, no, I'm just here to be with you. You're not sleeping but so you're not sleeping, but now you have the opportunity for us to be together. And I'm just here with you. And
so
whether
beautiful.
You sleep or not, that's okay. And I understand you're scared that you're not going to sleep, but it's not the point. Right. And I think what we're talking about, we can get so focused on like this result or these like things, paradigms that are wired in us that we don't even explore or think like, oh, it's a loving world. It's a loving universe. There's a lot of love available to me if I just open myself to it.
And sometimes in the middle of the night, the negative ions, the quiet, that's sometimes when I can read. I mean, I understand it's tough for people when you have to get up at a certain time in the morning to go to work. That's not a joke. But sometimes I think we resist being up when we actually don't have to get up in the morning right away. And there's a lot to those hours of greater quiet. You can feel the more fragile vibrations of spirit and wisdom and clarity that sometimes are unavailable to us during the day because everything is an assault in our modern culture.
Yeah. Hear, hear. All right. So you are running for president. You know, we have just talked about this message and mothering, and the predominant amount of people in my audience are women, but also men. You know, this message is inclusive and important for all of us. How, if someone's interested, can they support you? You know,
They can
I
go
know
to
there's go ahead.
They can go to Marianne2024.com. They can find out how to be involved as a volunteer. Certainly donations are great, you know, very gratefully accepted, because it takes a lot of money to run for president. And go to the website, Marianne2024, and see how you can get involved. And if you resonate with what we're talking about here, that we really need to change the direction of the country from a kind of soulless transactional perspective to a far more natural, nourishing, yes, mothering perspective. And that actually, I love how in the Course in Miracles it says, love restores reason, not the other way around. So the patriarchal mind says the mother is weaker, the feminine is weaker, when really what's weak is the soulless perspective that does not take care of your children. There's nothing strong about allowing your children to be destroyed. There's something very strong about protecting them and making sure that they'll be safe.
Thank you. Well, I'm hoping that everyone is inspired and is, you know, putting their foot forward or their voices forward or their pocketbooks forward. I know I am. And so
thank you so
super
much. I'm so grateful for your generosity.
Supporting you and your campaign. And we're going to keep exploring ways that, you know, how that's going to look. So the last question that I ask my guests, and I always get something different, but something so beautiful, is what does rewriting the mother code mean to you?
Rewriting it means remembering the mother code that's already deep within us. I remember when I was a young woman, years before I had children, I was already starting my career, and I had said to the women at my lectures that I would have a mother support group. And all these women were all excited, and they were going to come to my house for this mother support group. And I was very nervous. And I prayed and I said, God, I don't know what to tell mothers. I'm not a mother. I don't have any children. I don't know what to tell these women. And I got very clearly in my heart, just remind them that they already know. But the society, just like your breast knows, okay, your breast will know how to suckle your child. Yeah. The nature has imbued all of us, but particularly women, with this deep intuitional, multidimensional knowledge and wisdom. And the paradigm that dominates this planet has disconnected us from that, made us feel that it's less than, made us feel that that's just fantasy, made us feel, oh, that's just poppycock, that's just old old women's fairy tales or whatever. And then you come to realize, no, that deep knowing of the ages that was passed down over the generations. So the code of natural genius within the mother is already there. What we need to do is unlearn the diminishment of that. Make a stand for that which we know to be true. And the only other thing I'd add to that is take a stand for it in other women as well. Because we're not going to get there unless all of us get there. And we have to include sisterhood. That when you see other women struggling to get past the patriarchal prejudices in their lives, do what you can to lend a hand. We need to do this together.
Yeah, we need to be on one team, not, you know, tearing each other down. So that I think is such an important, not just add on, but closing, that we really need to be there for each other in this aspect. Marianne, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you.
I mean, same back.
Thank you for having me. I wish you all the best with your work. I hope that your work continues to be a place of real solace and inspiration. I remember how anxious I was when I first had my baby, and it can be a real overwhelming. And I know you bring hope and you bring lightness of spirit and transformation to women at a time when we most need it. So God bless you and all that you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for choosing yourself and taking the time to listen to this podcast. As always, please rate, review, and subscribe to subscribe to Mother. It helps other people who need this message, aka all women. Well, actually, everybody, men included, find it. I'm honored to have you on this journey in mothering yourself. Remember, change is uncomfortable, but it's beautiful, and it starts with us. And if you can't wait until next week's episode, follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn at Dr. Gertrude Lyons or at my website, drgertrudelyons.com. I'll see you next time.